Almost a month ago to the day, January 17, 2023, a man was stalked by a large black SUV, kidnapped in front of the closed gate of a gendarmerie station, taken to a place where he will be killed after being beaten, cut up, his bones broken. Hello, my name is Nathalie Yamb, and what has been happening in Cameroon since the discovery of the tortured remains of radio host Arsène Salomon Mbami Zogo, alias Martinez Zogo, in the suburbs of Yaoundé on January 22nd, 5 days after his abduction, looks like a horror movie. Obviously, many fake news, rumors, and wishful thinking propagated by anonymous avatars or gossip idiots on social networks incite any serious commentator to be cautious. But I would still like to come back on some aspects and share some of my thoughts with you. However, before doing so, I ask you to subscribe, like, and share this video if you haven't already done so. I am also launching a dedicated new English channel on YouTube to broadcast my English-speaking videos and podcasts. So please go subscribe to it too. The link is below. The first thing I want to mention is the bestiality that characterized the killing of Martinez Zogo, which is so appalling that it needs to be highlighted. Someone's father, husband, child was mutilated and tortured with a brutality worthy of South American drug cartel wars or the TV saga Game of Thrones. Cameroon has, alas, accustomed us to abominable acts committed by bandits or men in uniform. We recall the babies and their mothers shot by soldiers in North Cameroon in 2015, as well as the massacres of Ngabu or Kumba. But the most startling thing about this one is the insolence of the killers in exposing the body in a place for all to see instead of making it disappear. What was the message? The most plausible explanation is that the assurance of impunity has given the perpetrators and their sponsors an arrogance that will hopefully prove fatal to them. Another irrefutable fact is that this assassination took place in the context of a succession war within the ruling regime. Even the victim was part of this coterie, switching with a somewhat confusing volatility from celebrating to fighting certain people. At least two clans clash in Yaoundé in the wake of a very old president of the Republic who has just celebrated his 90th birthday, as if we were in a monarchy and that the constitution does not provide for the procedure to be followed in the event of a vacancy in power. One is organized around the General Secretariat of the Presidency, the other around the Ministries of Justice and Finance. In the middle, an individual stands out, a former cart pusher, whom some have decided to elevate as a tycoon and who will de facto become a billionaire in charge of the regime's dirty work. Embezzlement, nepotism, favoritism, abuse of power, big money, big boobies, gang warfare, and a lot of bloodshed. It's all happening in Yaoundé and not in King's Landing like in the HBO saga. The investigation is underway and some big fish are being questioned and taken into custody. the boss of the General Intelligence, his collaborator in charge of operations, other agents, the tycoon, the CEO of his media group, one of his fathers in law. The fishnet has not yet been pulled out of the troubled waters where it was thrown, and the nights of some pundits of the regime must not be very calm at the moment. There are numerous people who have a lot to lose if this investigation goes all the way. And this lack of serenity, coupled with the popular revolt brewing as a result of price inflation and wage stagnation, while the state funds are being looted by scum who gangrene the administration, is likely to seriously shake Cameroon in the coming days. Being the serious analyst that I am, I have to stick to factual information available and not to jump on the bandwagon of hearsay spread by French services such as Reporters Without Borders, the so-called journalists of RFI or other media subsidized by the Quai d'Orsay, the French Foreign Ministry. One thing, however, is indisputable. The atmosphere in Yaoundé is heavy, like in Wagner's opera Twilight of the Gods. If one can appreciate and commend how swiftly Paul Biya has ordered these investigations, which shows a desire for truth and justice that one thought had disappeared forever in Cameroon, one cannot avoid relevant criticism. Some people sometimes wonder why I don't confront Paul Biya more often. I have dedicated my life to the fight for the emancipation and sovereignty of the African people. In this fight, my enemies are France, its Western accomplices, and its African lackeys at the head of our states and within our administrations. In this context, Paul Biya is no longer in the front line. He understood with the Bakassi crisis that there was nothing to expect from Paris, and he buried his ambitions to be the best pupil of the Élysée Palace he had expressed earlier after a meeting with François Mitterrand in 1990. Quietly but relentlessly, he has rendered French security and economic interest in Cameroon meaningless. For those who do not know, the Bakassi conflict was triggered when in December 1993, after several skirmishes in previous years, the Nigerian army invaded the oil and fish-rich peninsula claimed by Cameroon. Assuming he would benefit from French military assistance under the cooperation agreement signed on February 21, 1974, Biya was disappointed to see the lack of responsiveness of Paris. Indeed, France was primarily concerned with preserving its own oil interests in Nigeria, and only agreed to activate the assistance clause very partially in 1996, 3 years after the outbreak of the conflict, limiting it to some consulting and little intelligence in what will be called Opération Aramis. What a difference with what is currently happening, where it only took a few days for France to financially, diplomatically and militarily helping Ukraine, to which it is not bound by any defense agreement as opposed to Cameroon at the time. But let's move on. Faced with this defection of this pseudo-French military ally, Cameroon took the legal route and brought the case before the International Court of Justice in The Hague, which ruled in its favor in October 2002. However, it was not until 2008 that the withdrawal of Nigerian troops and administration took place. Drawing lessons from this hypocritical understanding of the agreements, Paul Biya then systematically set about deconstructing them and emptying them of their substance. Thus, today, only a maximum of 15 French soldiers are allowed to be present, confined to teaching and filing far from any strategic tasks and information. And they must wear the uniform of the Cameroonian army. It should also be noted that Cameroon's doctrine is not to tolerate any foreign military base on its territory, and that in April 2022, Cameroon concluded a military cooperation agreement with Russia, the signing of which was accelerated by Paul Biya at the time when the European Union was threatening to sanction African countries who had refused to obey their instructions against Russia at the UN. Recalling all these makes Paul Biya's attitude all the more unacceptable. After 40 years of absolute ruling, he has allowed clans to spread in his entourage, fighting each other by shedding the blood of Cameroonians to succeed him on the throne or to ensure that it remains in their camp. Though all sides involved count on their respective French help to achieve it. The Élysée, the Quai d'Orsay, Bolloré, Bouygues, business cycles, the army, the Freemason, and so on. What was the point of diluting French influence, of diversifying partnerships, if Cameroon is to fall back into the hands of this Western thug state 4 decades later? How could he allow so many criminals, corrupt people, and pro-French agents to flourish around him with impunity? What is Paul Biya waiting for to put order in his ranks? Order that he expects from the youth, as he stated during his speech on February 11. From a national point of view, his legacy is catastrophic. Not only will he leave behind a country where tribalism and division are at their peak, but where the great ambitions and achievements promised have turned out to be great nothingness. The moral misery that characterizes Cameroon is matched only by the blatant poverty in which the majority of the population finds itself, except for the small, depraved and corrupt group that manages the country. A Cameroon where prostitutes are presented by members of the government as models of social success for a lost youth, where media representatives, whom it is difficult to call journalists, in return for payment, use their microphones, their newspapers, or their TV stations to broadcast the narrative of the highest bidder, where the law is bent, where the law enforcement is misused to repress the people, where some big guys among governing bodies let the situation in Nozo worsen for their own personal benefits, where the military become contract killers, where trial starts but do not end, where thugs are untouchable, where officials can accumulate 53 buildings, where the opposition is as mediocre as those who govern, where the stolen money is never repaid or recovered, where those sentenced to long prison terms for embezzlement of millions freely walk around town and flaunt their wealth. A Cameroon where someone who steals a measly hand of plantain to feed his family has a better chance of rotting and dying in jail than someone stealing 180 billion CFA from the COVID fund. Death, prison, and violence are always on the agenda of political struggle in Africa and are often used by those who hold the means of the state. Back in the days, it was done by the colonists, then by those who replaced them, who we called the fathers of independence. And since then, it continues happily. Out of this unfortunate set of events rises a critical question. How do those to whom we give the means of the state use that power against the Cameroonian citizen? That topic needs to be discussed on the occasion of the Martinez Zogo scandal. Putting my own life on the line, I fight for our liberation, to get rid of the Western and external powers that continuously seek to oppress and control us. But this is only half of the battle, as we aren't fighting such a fight for some among us to become the new oppressors of the African people. How are we going to organize ourselves going forward? This is the kind of question that needs to be addressed, not only in Cameroon, but all over Africa. I also call on the opposition. This isn't only about replacing Biya, Sal, Sassou to do the same thing. Tell us what you intend to do. Tell us how you conceive the relationship between the state and the citizen, so that it is ensured that all are equal before the law, that all benefit from an impartial and diligent justice, and that the rights and the life of the average citizens are as well protected as the rights and the life of the powerful. Finally, I see the hashtag Justice for Martinez Zogo all over the internet. This is good, but it's not enough. It's not only for Zogo that justice must be served. It is also for Bibi Ngota, Samuel Mwazizi, for Angelbert Mveng, for Bishop Bala, for Brian Fombo, for you, for me, for everybody. And that is what I personally expect of all those who claim to want to lead Cameroon in the future. Speaking of hashtags, in 2014, I created on Twitter and Facebook the hashtag Pays Penché for Cameroon. The outcome of the investigation into the heinous murder of Martinez Zogo will tell us whether this country has the capacity to unite and recover, or whether it has completely folded in the face of evil, mediocrity, violence, corruption, division, and tribalism. Which Cameroonians, which Africans do we want to be? I invite you to watch the video I made on this subject. What is each of us, each of you, doing every day to get closer to the humanity, serenity, brotherhood, modernity, and prosperity to which we rightly aspire? Or are we going to, like Daenerys Targaryen in the opus Game of Thrones, give the order to burn every millimeter of this African land that we claim to love and fight for?
Dracarys.
I invite you to discuss this politely in the comments. And also for those of you who can afford it to contribute financially to my fundraiser, the links are below, to allow me to continue producing educational content. May the responsibility be with you. Thank you and see you soon.